Olá, muito boa tarde, sejam bem-vindos a mais um programa mensal Marketing Today. Eu sou o Pedro Caramês, sou especialista em marketing digital com um retoque especial para o mundo do LinkedIn, que é onde provavelmente aqui está ou aqui eventualmente me conhece. Tenho hoje aqui, juntamente com a Cláudia, levar também a efeito neste caso pela segunda vez, este programa mensal de Marketing Today. Estes programas tipicamente têm um convidado, que já irei passar a apresentar, e este programa é, na maioria dos casos, também conduzido em inglês, pelo que os próximos 30 a 45 minutos serão colocados aqui em inglês, e portanto, mas dos quais gostaria muito de contar com a sua participação aqui, seja para conhecer um bocadinho da história da nossa convidada de hoje, seja também para podermos aqui também participar ao longo deste programa e, quem sabe, poder ganhar aqui ou habilitar-se a receber um livro autografado da autora que convidamos aqui. Portanto, vou fazer este shift agora para passarmos para inglês e para podermos então dar início a este programa. So, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks to that you have joined in this on LinkedIn, YouTube, or Facebook. This is the monthly event called Marketing Today. Marketing Today is an initiative created by me and Claudia to discuss the marketing landscape to a broader scale by inviting people just like Jenna from different parts of the world, CMOs, speakers, brands, marketing leaders that we want to learn more from. And so this program was only possible with Claudia. Claudia, so many of you probably are not familiar. Claudia is a marketing professional that spent more than 20 years in the corporate side of things, working in 3 cities, Lisbon, Barcelona, and Madrid, and in different industries, starting her career managing brands in the FMCG industry or area. In the past 9 months, or 9 years, sorry, she was focused on 360 marketing strategies and strategic partnerships while at Walt Disney. So with everything introduced, may I welcome you to Jenna. Jenna, thanks for accepting the call for these 2 Portuguese to be among us and to share a little bit of your knowledge with us today.
Olá, boa tarde. Nice to be here.
Thanks, Jenna. Claudia,
I will. Thank you so much, Pedro, for your presentation. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And thank you, Jenna, once again for joining us. I'm very excited because we will speak about one of my favorite topics, that is strategy. So we are lucky to have you here today. Thank you once again. So, guys, you need to know Jenna. I will briefly introduce her. She's an email marketing strategist, founder and strategy director of Let's Talk Strategy, an agency that helps businesses optimize their marketing. She is also a public speaker and the author of the book recently published, since May, I believe, Marketing Strategy, Overcome Common Pitfalls and Creative Effective Marketing. And also a fun fact about Jenna, she lives in Portugal, so she knows a bit of Portuguese. So we will challenge her once in a while to speak a bit of Portuguese. And you have to practice. So Jenna, as Pedro said, welcome to our second session of Marketing Today, where we love to talk about marketing and interesting people and industry experts. Also important, I don't know, Pedro, if you want to point out that if you want to make us questions, please do, because it's an opportunity since we have this wonderful lady here. Jenna, we want you to share your thoughts about marketing strategies, but also about your book. But before that, I'm curious, how did you land in the marketing field?
Yeah, sure. So, thanks again for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I started marketing. I got a marketing degree, so I kind of went down that what's typically classed as a traditional route. And I did a business management and marketing degree, and it was within that I really started to like the creative process of marketing and the planning and coming together and bringing campaigns together. And then from then on, I was lucky enough to get a job straight out of university. I joined a small company where they'd never done any marketing before, and it was just me. I was the marketeer. I did everything from optimizing their website to actually dispatching the campaign and actually using direct mail at the time and printing off the letters and sending it all. And it was a really good way of seeing the whole process of marketing. Yeah, exactly. And I'm really getting to use all of the marketing mix, which is quite rare because you don't necessarily get that experience. Mm-hmm. And then from there, I've worked at multiple different companies, from B2B large or wholesalers to travel companies where I managed all of their online operation, e-commerce operation for more than 9 countries. And it's through that I really started to develop my interest in digital and move more into website optimization, SEO, PPC, and then eventually into email. And how I got into email was because everybody would talk about these channels like PPC and SEO and say how great they were and what revenue they were driving. And no one would ever talk about email.
Yeah, it's the poor.
And email was really delivering. And I'm like, I'm sitting in this team meeting and no one's talking about email. Why is email just in the corner expecting to do really great results and no one talks about it? And it's never a conversation when it was looking at budget split. It was always what paid advertising were we going to do. And I had this at a few places that I worked at. I worked at some financial companies, I then worked at bigger global brands as well, and it was the same. And it really started to pique my interest. And then I got an opportunity to join an email technology company, head up their strategy department, and talk about email, both in the UK and across Europe. And it was from there that I was able to really see the results that email could deliver, but actually how underutilized and under-resourced the channel was, and the results it's delivering, even bearing that in mind. So that's my kind of real key interested area now, is in email and email strategy.
Jenna, the book. After all those experience comes the book. What was the book designed for? What are you thinking? Of course, that's a sum of all your experiences, previous experience, but a book is a book. And who was the element that said, Jenna, you have to bring all of this knowledge into a book? And so can you tell us a little bit about the beginning elements and of course this idea to bring on a book about all of this?
Yeah, sure. So the idea for the book came about 3 years ago, and it's taken a long time to write this book. The reason why I wanted to write the book was because I get very frustrated, as I'm sure lots of marketers do, that we have a huge misunderstanding between the difference of strategy and tactics. And I wanted to write a book that clearly explained the difference and clearly explained what needed to go into a strategy to help marketers, business owners, and students understand all of the elements that need to go into a marketing plan and not just think about the tactical element. And as being a teacher as well, students come to class and they hear all about all the amazing things that Gary Vee is doing, say, for example, but it's so tactically driven that no one talks about the strategy. So I thought, if I really want to deal with this problem and I really want to have clients come to me and ask more about strategy than tactics, then I need to do something about it. And the book was born, and I was lucky to get publishers Kogan Page on board. and have lots of people input, lots of case studies and lots of support for the book. But that's not to say it was easy to write, because it definitely wasn't. It's very hard to write a book and condense everything down and make sure you don't miss anything. And it's a really long process to get it to final.
And research also, and to be accurate with the data. Yeah, it's so good.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
I imagine that. Pedro also wrote a book.
Well, that's a different story. Yeah, well, I've read a book a couple of years now. Hopefully in September, a new child will come, a new book will come. But as Jenna said, it's tough, because speaking about all of this usually makes you in some way say, okay, I cannot avoid to speak about this. So a new feature comes along and you say, oh my God, I need to change this. So a lot of issues speaking about and writing a book, of course, all the elements, but we will touch that in a couple of minutes now. Yeah. Claudia, it's up to you.
Yeah, it's curious, because you were mentioning the tactics and the strategy. It's a question I often do to people when I talk to marketers. So in this overwhelming world we are living, where there are so many strategies and tools, and people say that they are the ones that they are presenting are the best. So today, in this competitive world, how do you think brands, what strategy should they use to grow their customers to fans? Because it's completely different to have a customer or a fan, because fans keep buying from you.
Yeah, of course. I think the number one kind of starting point is to define what value is that the business is giving to those customers who they then want to turn into fans, or fans that they want to turn into customers. They might have a lot of fans, but maybe not so many customers. I think what we tend to do as marketers, and sometimes it is because we are pressured with time or lack of resource, is that we go after like the shiny tactics. So say Clubhouse, for example, it was quite a prime example where a lot of people flocked to Clubhouse but didn't really think about their audience and whether or not their audience would actually be on Clubhouse, or whether it just sounded great and everyone else is using it, so I also need to do it. Yeah, it's the new sexy piece of tech to be using and the new tactic. But actually the strategy piece, really to boil it down between the difference between strategy and tactics. Strategy is the who, the what, the where, the why, and the when of what you're doing. And then the tactics is the how. The tactics have a really important part to play to actually implement the strategy, but they don't drive the strategy. The strategy should be driving the tactics. And I think that's the bit that we have the wrong way around. So when you're thinking about, converting your fans into customers or customers into fans, really need to think about what's the value to them in the first place. What's your USP? What's your unique selling point? And how are you going to service those customers? What makes you different to your competitors, and your strategy should be pulling all of that together for you.
And you need to know very well the customer, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Completely.
You mentioned on your book, you mentioned Steve Jobs, a moment where you mentioned vision is the cornerstone of any decent strategy. So it's a little bit of what you are mentioning. So it's the base in order to keep following and be coherent throughout the journey that you do as a company, and to know very well the customer. And just before Pedro asks you another question, between the tactics and the strategy, do you find many difference between the countries that you work with, your agency work with? For instance, Portugal, your Portuguese clients versus other clients?
Yeah, great question. No, I think there is. I think across the world and across the marketing industry, there is still a huge misconception between strategy and tactics. I don't think I've ever worked with a client, or we've ever worked with a particular country as an agency where they've just got it. They've just understood strategy. I don't think there is one country that stands out in our minds on that, or industry, to be honest. I think across the board we are still really challenged with that definition. And Mark Ritson, who is a very well known marketing thought leader, says this all the time about us always chasing tactics. So I think, and he's based in Australia, so I think globally we have, as a marketing industry, we have a bit of a challenge there of overcoming that, which is what the book is there for. But just going back to your point about vision, I think the other challenge that we have with marketing sometimes, if it is very tactically driven, is that we don't necessarily align ourselves with the business vision. And then when we have those budget conversations of how much marketing is delivered, you might have delivered loads, but actually it's not aligned to the business. And so the business doesn't see the value in marketing. And that's sometimes where we start to see, marketing budgets getting completely cut, resources getting cut, because it hasn't been aligned to the vision of the company. And that's the danger of following tactics ahead of strategy.
Yeah. And it's frustrating for the professional marketing professionals also.
Of course,
not to be the driver of the company, because they should be as related directly to the business and not only the commercial part or the engineers. It's really a relevant point. I totally agree with you, Jenna.
Yeah, completely agree with you as well on that.
Jenna, concerning your writing process to deliver this book, your book is divided in 10 chapters. Can you guide us? What was your idea when you structured the book? And of course, the question, during this pandemic moments we are living, how could you, what were the challenges to handle all of this and to come up with these 10 chapters here? And what was your idea concerning? So the question is around the writing process of the book.
Sure. So the book is broken down into 10 chapters because I wanted to break down strategy. So I created a strategy framework, and each letter in strategy means a part of the strategy that needs to go into the framework. And so it felt like a natural fit to have each one of those as a chapter, but that didn't come at the very beginning. That actually came quite near the end, where I really wanted to pull together a framework. And so I really want to get this in a really concise way, so that it's really easy to remember what goes into each stage, but also that you could pick the book up and already have a strategy and jump in and out of, different aspects. So it becomes a manual and it becomes really practical
and understandable.
And there's tasks in there, there's areas to write notes and things like that. So I actually changed the structure quite late on because I then developed the strategy framework and it just clicked, and I was like, right, and now I actually have the breakdown. This is how I could break it down into the book. Each one has a chapter. And then I have the 10 common pitfalls at the end, because I feel that there's always these 10 common areas that we might fall over or we could try and avoid. And I wanted to have just a go-to area where you could just jump to the back of the book as a marketeer and think, oh, actually, I'm facing that right now. How do I avoid or overcome this? In terms of writing the book, I had numerous deadlines with the publishers, which was very stressful.
The worst.
Yeah, very stressful.
It's a frenemy.
Yeah, it's good to push you to get it to finish the book, but it's very stressful, and it was very stressful during times of COVID. You might think, okay, COVID means that you've got a bit more time, yeah, but actually your head is not in the right place to be writing a book. And so it's funny, I kind of went through a phase of, you start writing and you think, oh, this is okay, this is good, I can do this, and then you get about halfway through and you think, I'm not sure I can finish this book. What am I doing? Why have I said yes to this? I'm not going to make the deadline.
Being done that.
Exactly. And then you get feedback from the publishers and you're like, oh, actually it's okay, I can keep going. And then you get near the end and you're like, I'm exhausted with this book, I never want to look at it again, I just want to get it finished. And then it's out there and you think, yes, I've done that, it's amazing. So you kind of go through this whole, you go through this whole roller coaster.
I think it's a roller coaster of feelings.
Totally.
You at the beginning, you feel super excited, structuring everything, super energized, and then, well, seems like a big mountain. You will say, oh my God, I'm not seeing the end of this.
Yeah, definitely that. And in the book, I actually put in the objectives that I had to finish the book. So I had a particular word limit minimum that I needed to meet, but I could go over that to a certain extent with the publishers. And so I created objectives of breaking that down so that I could try and write so much a week, because I'm running an agency at the same time. So pretty much all of the time I spent writing the book was at weekends. I was actually sat in my hammock in the garden, just switched off, music in, and just writing away. And that for me was a good structure, because it meant that I could tell whether or not I was going to hit the deadline or miss the deadline, or I might need a little bit more time, and see how far you could get with that. So I actually created a plan and strategy to develop the book, which I've included it in the book.
Of course.
Naturally. And that really helped me, because I think without that, I could have just floated around for years trying to finish the book. You've got to have some structure to it.
Okay, but you did it. You did it very well. So I wanted to be a bit more tactical now, if you allow me. Being an email marketing strategist, I wanted to explore a bit more of that, since it's one of the most powerful tools, like you mentioned before, to communicate direct. It's an asset where you can communicate directly with your audience. So, and also people, sometimes when you are building a strategy of where to spend the budget, it's mostly they put the eggs, they all put all the eggs on the same basket. So it's challenging to do the split of social media, PPC, as you were mentioning. And in case of email marketing, it's, as far as I can understand, people go every day they check the email at least once a day, minimum. Surely they will, it's the thing they start doing in their days before checking social media. So it's really a powerful tool. So in terms of relevance and in terms of mix with the text messaging, how do we, in terms of text marketing, text messaging and email marketing, how do you think these tools should be used alongside with the other tools, and what budget splits you think would be more advisable, or a lot of questions in one?
Yeah, no, it's good. Email delivers the highest ROI out of any digital channel, and it has done for years and years and years. I'm heavily involved in the email industry in the UK. I sit on the DMA Email Council, which is a group of 20 people, elected people, and we shape the best practice in the UK, and then sometimes that's fed into Europe as well, and we have lots of conversations about that. And we conduct research every year, and email is the preferred channel of consumers, delivers the highest ROI, yet consistently in all research we see that it's the most under-resourced. And I think there's a couple of things there. I think firstly, it's a very cheap channel to run, and it's seen as a very cheap channel. So I think in the past, I would say probably 2-3 years ago, it was very, very much a batch and blast, sent to everybody, no segmentation. Yeah. It wasn't strategic in any way at all, because it was so cheap and the risk wasn't necessarily there. GDPR then came in, and that made businesses have to change their approach, because you couldn't just send to everybody if you didn't have the permission, or other aspects in there as well. So I think there's still a huge opportunity with email. I think the UK as an industry is quite advanced in what they're doing. I think the US has different rules, and so there's different things that happen there, but they tend to be much more sales driven, less customer journey focused, the organization.
Or educational.
Yeah, and less of that mix. It's very much heavily 90%, 80% of content to be sales orientated. And then I think the rest of Europe, it's a real difference. You know, in Germany, customers are very formal. They don't want to have that sales message. You have to be really delicate with how you use email. And in the Portuguese market, I think there's still a lot of opportunities. There's lots of emails that are sent that are full image based, that probably are still batch and blast, and heavily sales orientated. So there's still some opportunity there to develop email. I think the difference between email and SMS, so text messaging is a tricky channel because it's seen as being quite invasive still. We'll look at our phone and we'll get a message and we'll respond straight away. So the read rate is really high. It's like 98% of all messages sent are read. But that doesn't mean that customer at the end is happy that they've just received that SMS. And so there is a real...
And you cannot unsubscribe.
Well, you can, but it's not as easy. Yeah, you can. And it should be in the message itself, but that isn't always the case. And I think that's the experience that most customers have had, where they haven't been able to get out of a cycle of SMSs. They didn't realize they were signing up to SMS. And so it has a really negative connotation with customers. Where it's really useful is if it's like delivery updates, or like your order's on its way, or confirming an order. Then it's
status
really
of the order.
Yeah, I've worked with some retailers that have used it as flash sales, and their customers know that they've subscribed to that, and it's like a VIP flash sale, and it's just coming up now, and
only for
24
you.
hours. Yeah, then it works really, really well. It has to be very time sensitive in how it's used. So it's a completely different approach when using SMS to email. Yeah, exactly.
Because in the email you can create a relation with the customer if you know what is your audience, and also if you do a good balance between selling and educating and adding value.
Yeah, email comes across the entire customer journey. It's one of the only channels that does, from being a prospect to visiting a website, going all the way through to being a customer to then being a returning customer. It comes all the way through that experience, and each time, each message should be completely different and have that context. It also adds lots of value is that it's not necessarily classed as owned data, but the company has that data. They're not reliant on Facebook or Twitter, for example. They have that as part of their arsenal as a business. And if a company is looking to sell their organization, they will get asked for the engagement rate and the list size of their email marketing, because it's seen as an asset to a business, which is very different to when you look at social media, where you might
the algorithm.
You might have 15,000 fans on Facebook, for example, but if Facebook changed their rules tomorrow, that could be gone. And you're very heavily reliant then on those technology providers and those tools, whereas email is, you control that as the business, and that makes it very unique. And I think that's why it's lasted all of this time, ahead all of these new tactics. It's still the one that's very consistent.
Okay. And I have curiosity in a couple of things, Pedro, before you're moving on. In terms of the budget split in the digital marketing, what do you think it would be, or your opinion? It depends surely about B2B, B2C, depends on the business, but an average of what should be the split between the several media?
Yeah, it really depends on lots of different things, like the industry, the customers, the company. But I would say from experience, email never gets enough of the budget. Never. I've never seen it get enough of the budget, not once actually. And even with organizations that have invested in AI, for example. And they've achieved amazing results, that still was underinvested in comparison to the other digital channels. So I think there's a huge gap there for the value that email can deliver, even at this low budget level, to actually putting more investment in and driving even more value from email.
Okay. I want to get back to the AI, but Pedro, please.
Okay. The curiosity moves us. So when Claudia is on curiosity mode, I will, of course, let her in. So the questions interesting here. Jenna, as this book is concerning around strategy, who do you think should read this book? This book was thought for a specific reader. Who do you think are the ideal people to read these? Only C-level executives or people on the trenches, on the operational side, should also check on the book? Who do you think? What were you thinking when you were writing the book? You probably have thought about this, as you said, the customer at first. So who should read this?
Yeah, exactly. This was my main focus, to make sure that I actually have provided value to all of these people. So to business owners, marketers, so marketing professionals, students, anyone aspiring to actually use marketing or learning marketing, for teachers as well. There's lots of frameworks and different methods in there to use, as well as case studies that are exclusive to the book. And also entrepreneurs. So there's lots of startups, and there's a huge growth of that now during COVID times, for where they're not really sure where to start with marketing, and they don't really know how to set objectives. It can act as a guide to help for that as well. So a real broad range of people.
Right. Because now, sometimes women, usually, as you said, people really are more focused on the operational side of things, on the more that end of and usually these topics, they are believed to be or supposed to be theoretical, and sometimes, as you said, one of the several pitfalls you identified 10 pitfalls. I don't know if you want to stress out one or two of these pitfalls. So probably the majority of professionals watching us now will probably be identified with some of them, but usually sometimes relevant to hear about and to stress out all these 10 pitfalls you wrote here. So if you'd like to say one or two of them, so we will.
Yeah, sure. I guess one of the ones that I think, I've definitely come across a lot, and I'm sure lots of marketing professionals get frustrated with, is brand guidelines. So I worked with, my agency were working with a technology company, and we were actually their marketing agency, outsourced support, and I was working as their marketing director, and we had a whole team of support there. And their branding was just so unorganized in every single way that it was displayed differently. And this was a startup organization, so they'd gone through lots of evolution of branding. They brought in branding agencies. They spent lots of time, lots of money on branding, but no one seemed to really have any idea of how to use the brand. And it was being used differently across the entire business in both how they spoke about the company, but also how it was visually displayed. And they had a real challenge of engaging their target audience. And so when I was there, I was there to stress that if you're inconsistent in how you talk about yourselves and how you display yourselves, you will struggle to connect and engage your audience. And it transpired later down the line that there was actually 20 different variations of brand guidelines that were saved on the Google Drive and nobody really knew which was the latest one to use. So everybody was going in and out of these documents and just cherry picking bits and pieces that they wanted to use. And they didn't have consistent assets. They didn't have a consistent way of how to talk about themselves in terms of a strap line or a sentence. And they had, not only did they have all these variations of different brand guidelines, their brand guideline documents were up to 20 to 30 pages long. And when you have something that is that long and includes that many different variations of colors, which I think it had every color of the rainbow available to use as part of their brand guideline, it just meant that everybody had their own personal interpretation, and it just created a real mess of real unbranded miscommunication. It was just a mess, both internally and externally to the audience as well, to their target audience. And that was why they were struggling to break through, because no one really knew what they did, because they didn't really know internally. So that is a real big pitfall, because brand guidelines should be like a one-page document that everybody can use, whether it's
like a guide.
Yeah, and they should be really concise, really key on the colors that you use, how your logo should be displayed, and then just have those assets readily available. So if you are presenting at an event or you're doing some sponsorship, you send it to those partners and they have that as well. And then inside the organization, everybody knows what you do, because it's just so clear. It's like a single sentence. And without that, it's really difficult to break through. It's really difficult to engage your staff. And it's really difficult to actually engage your audience, because they don't really understand what you do if you're just, you're just completely displaying yourself in different places. So I include that as a pitfall, but also how to overcome that with examples as well in the book, as well as the other 9 that are in there.
Jenna, using that example, do you think the main difference on is on the smaller companies versus big multinationals? Because, for instance, as a brand as Walt Disney or Coca-Cola, then you need to, in order to have the image that you have after so many years, you need to be very strict about your brand, have a lot of rules. And I live that in all the Star Wars and Marvel, with a lot of rules and things to get moving on. And do you think it's a problem of smaller companies only, or you found also bigger ones that have those issues also?
Yeah, I think it's across the board, but the companies that have got it right, like the likes of Disney, Lego, you've got Apple, for example, where you are really strict and really clear actually on how the brands should be displayed, then that is what the guidelines are there for. I think I've seen it across bigger organizations as well as small, where the kind of thought is that you bring in a branding agency in and it will solve all your problems for you, and that isn't the case, because you have to actually implement that branding as well. You can't just take a document and expect everyone to use it. It has to be a living, breathing part of the company.
Culture almost.
Yeah, exactly. And it has to align, again, when we go back to that vision piece we were talking about earlier, it has to align to the vision of the organization as well, in how they're displaying themselves. So I suppose you will see, I probably have seen it a little bit more in smaller organizations, where it's just being, okay, yeah, we've done it and it's the job done and forget about it. But I have also seen it in larger organizations where it just hasn't been clear at all, or there's been too many variations, too much change, and therefore it's lacking the buy-in from the employees.
Yeah, okay. Great. I wanted to double click on the AI on the emails, because it's you mentioned already, and it's also written on your book in an interview we did, using the AI on the copy, on the headline. Do you think it's versus a copywriter, a human person? How do you balance that? So it's quite hard, because it's one job less. So using the AI will be the solution in the future.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is a real fear that the AI and the robot is going to take our jobs. But the AI only works really well, firstly, when there's a clear strategy for using it. And secondly, when there is human input. It can't work on its own. So how I see it is that, and how I've seen it work most effectively, is when it's been used as a marketing assistant, and it has assisted the copywriter, and it has assisted the marketing team to understand more about their customer base. So I worked with, my agency worked with global brand Hilton, and we ran an experiment with them on bringing in AI to help drive more engagement with their email subscribers. And that was our whole objective. It wasn't necessarily about driving more sales, but they wanted to be able to connect more with their customers, and also drive that engagement piece. And they felt that they were running out of ideas for subject lines. So they thought, well, maybe we could use AI and it will give us more ideas, engage our audience, and we'll learn a lot more from it as well at scale. And so they trialed it. They trialed it in the States, and they ran an experiment of 10 subject lines, one being the human subject line that they would have used.
Wow.
And yeah, and then sent that campaign out, and the human subject line came last, and the AI subject lines won. But what was most interesting was the ones that won were the ones that, as marketers and the marketing team, would have just discounted anyway. And that's the beauty of AI, because it's using machine learning, and it will then learn for the next send.
Yeah, and in the future they will not suggest that if you, okay.
Exactly, and it can crunch those numbers so much more quickly, in a way that as humans we would never be able to do it in that time frame. It would take us a lifetime in what the machine can do. And that's where the assistant piece comes in, because it starts to then highlight not only the gap between what the marketing team thought and the customers, but also what the customers really engaged with. And in 3 months, not only did it increase engagement of using AI, it drove more sales. And that wasn't the original plan, but it meant that it actually paid for that investment. Okay. And now it's used globally for all of their campaigns. It's used as standard, and they can then pull out what those top subject lines are and use that content in other channels like social media, for example, and PPC, and inform other digital channels. So it really starts to work across all, not just be siloed in the corner.
But still, the human eye, it's still important.
Exactly, yeah. I don't see it as a way. I know there's this big fear about it taking people's jobs, but I don't see it that way at all. It is the assistant. It has to be fed to. You have to feed in the brand for a start.
The voice of the brand.
The voice, yeah, some words you might not want to use, for example. You still need to feed it, and you still need to analyze those results, and the human will always be needed for that.
Okay, great. Well, we are reaching our time, but I still wanted to make you a question, since the audience it's very diverse. Not only students, but also entrepreneurs. So what's it's a common question, or what advice would you give to the young Jenna when starting?
Yeah, I'm actually doing an interview series.
Well, not that you are old, you are really young, so the younger.
I know what you mean. I'm actually doing an interview series, and I've been asking everyone else this question, so now this is my comeback. I think what I would give my younger self is to be braver. So to be braver in asking those questions. So when sitting in a meeting, and particularly when I first started out my marketing career, I would sit in a meeting and be the only woman in that room of like 20 people, and you can be quite intimidated with that when you've just come out of university and you think I've got a real question about whether or not this is the right thing to do, or why we're doing things this way, but you don't necessarily have the confidence to ask that question when you first start out. And now I would always say just be braver, just ask those questions, because questions is what then starts to open up that conversation. And it might be something that no one's thought about. It might be something that everybody's thought about, but it's good to show that curiosity. I think the other part is to always keep learning. And I do this anyway, but I think to have that mindset from the very beginning that once you finish your degree, that learning doesn't stop there, it keeps going. And it's really important to have that learning and curiosity piece. And that's what's really kind of got me where I am, I guess, from that curiosity of email and why is it being put into the corner. But to have more of that. So that would be what I would say to my younger self.
Excellent, Jenna. And I will say this final remarks. It was a pleasure to have you here, and to be hopefully a part of your Portuguese history. This event was probably the first event for a Portuguese audience. Eventually, I don't know, but hopefully others will come. Yeah.
It's my second, so I'm getting there slowly.
Great. So you're beginning this momentum here. Hopefully, the third event in Portugal will be quite nice. It was a very inside joke here, but hopefully your third event will going to be an outstanding event. All the outcome of it. Claudia, I don't know if you want to say the final remarks, so we will close with you.
Ask Jenna, how can people follow you? So you are active in what media? In social media or?
Yeah, so I'm on Twitter at Jenna Tiffany, on LinkedIn /Jenna Tiffany, and available on my website as well.
Okay, thank you so much, Jenna. It was
inside the presentation here, so everybody can follow you in the different areas here. I have already it's easy to find Jenna on Twitter, so at Jenna Tiffany, or also the LinkedIn, so it will be easy for everyone to follow along.
Thank you. It was a really treat to have this conversation with you. Thank you so much. I hope the audience also enjoyed it.
Muito obrigada. Thank you very much.
With muito obrigada, we will end the session now. I hope to see you, everyone, in next month, as me and Claudia will have another edition of this Marketing Today. So stay tuned for another guest from any part of the world who's coming here to provide them relevant knowledge, and eventually we will have another amazing guest to enrich your learnings also about the topics around marketing. So wishing you all the best, and I will close now. Just wait just a little bit, my fellow colleagues here of the panel, as we will close the session. Bye-bye.
Beijinhos.
Ciao.
Ciao.